All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Interviews with Experts here with UprofitPro. John Lavenia here as your host and head interviewer. And today we're talking with somebody who I've got a special relationship with because it was actually this individual and myself started as entrepreneurs in the direct selling industry on the same day. It's like we're brothers in arms over here. And it's been years and years and years. And as the case with many people I've interviewed and many people I've been able to expose you to as listeners here with UprofitPro, people from my past and people whose paths are crossed throughout the years, and we've gone in different directions. Same thing with this guy. He has developed a set of aptitudes very different from mine. I've often said that I don't even consider myself that good at any of this network marketing stuff, right? Especially like the networking part and also the marketing part. So it's interesting that I've made millions doing this, but this guy, I would say, is among the best at marketing. I don't know about networking, maybe not, but definitely this guy knows the ways of marketing, actually putting the public's attention on what you're doing, what you're offering, what your opportunity is, this sort of thing, starting that conversation, which I know is something that a lot of people are very interested in learning how to do more and more. And I'm sure I'll learn a few things on this interview too. So I am talking today with Jashin Howell from Arizona, USA. Jashin Howell, man, it's been some years. We've evolved. I think we have. Allegedly, we have. What's going on with you?
Man, I'm just grateful to be on this call with you. It's exciting. And you know what? I feel we're kindred brothers, man. I mean, the same day. It was July 11th, right?
7/11.
Isn't that the day? Yeah.
Hard day to forget, man. 7/11.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's exciting because we've come so far. I mean, and that was back in 2002. So here we're talking almost a decade that we've known each other, 9 years right now. Actually, we're coming up almost on our birthday again. And, it's just neat to think that one decision that we made to become entrepreneurs and work for ourselves and not work for the man anymore or woman, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was just that decision that has shaped our lives up to this point. And I got to tell you, that was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life. That and getting married to my wife.
That's beautiful. And, I think it's the same with you, but I know for me, it wasn't my first rodeo. So I almost didn't make that decision because, hey, I had done other businesses before. I had experimented for a few years in multi-level, traditional style multi-level marketing. I had been in franchising. I believe you had also had some entrepreneurial experiences prior to entering this world, which we've been playing in for almost a decade now, which is considered the top tier direct selling world. What led up to that for you? Maybe a bit of history and all that.
Well, I mean, for me, John, and I think it's important for people to understand, kind of where I came from, because I think this is a valid kind of perspective and angle to really look at what my situation was. Throughout my 20s, I actually struggled with a drug addiction. And it started in high school and progressed on throughout my early 20s and on up until I got around the age of 30 is when I was finally able to overcome some of the demons that held me bound for so long. And the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of people had that time for preparation during that time frame. And what I mean by that is that, they're in business, they're working for themselves or working for someone else, or, they're going to school or doing whatever they're doing during their 20s. I wasn't doing that. I was spending all my money on drugs and just, I was flat down. And so at the time I got to age 30, I had to play catch up, man, because I had nothing. Me and my wife got married and she's the one that got us into the business. You know what I mean? And so it was just a poor situation that I had found myself in. However, I always knew of my potential. I always had a belief in myself and what was possible. And I did have a good positive mindset for the most part with regards to my capabilities. And so I knew that anything that I did, I could get good at. And if I modeled after successful people and I was around mentors that, were, did what they said they were going to do and had the integrity like you talk about with your book, then I knew that I could have the exact same success. Why couldn't I? I was just as good as anybody else. And I had to play catch up really quick and I had to make things happen for myself really quick. And so when I found this industry, it was after I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was always attracted to those types of people, the movers and shakers and that type of arena. And, I'd done a auto glass business before that. I had done Amway and other network marketing companies, a World Marketing Alliance, which was a financial services company. I had tried every single one, and I did not have success in any other one. And it was when I found this company that we both found at that, back in July of 2002, that things started changing for me. And I think the biggest thing that really happened was I had to overcome a lot. Even though I was a positive thinker and stuff like that, I still had a lot of negative thinking that kept penetrating. And so what I did is I just started working on myself. And we had good, solid leadership around us to teach us what to do. And I think that's a really key important thing that I'm sure you've discussed on many of your other calls on the importance of having a mentor and leaders and people that are actually doing the necessary work, but most importantly, working on themselves. Because the biggest thing that anybody and anyone listening right now can do is to work on yourself. And when you do that, then everything else seems to fall in place easily and effortlessly because you've got the one thing that is 90%, as we've talked before, 90% of the makeup of your success is what you're doing, how you're thinking. And how you're, projecting yourself as a leader. Yeah, exactly. Who you're being. That's right.
Yeah. It's interesting that you go right to that because you come from some pretty dire circumstances, right? There's a drug history.
Yep.
And yet enough self-belief to pull yourself out of that, right? I remember talking to a lot of people around that world of rehabilitating a person after, getting some life skills back and all this kind of thing. And a lot of times when people are coming out of that sort of an environment, there's a bit of being down on themselves, right? And low self-esteem and all this sort of thing. But one thing that people who are successful at rehabilitating themselves and coming out of that and gaining back some control in their life and some workability and whatever, one thing that they have to recognize and that they do recognize is that people with low self-esteem don't make that effort. Okay. So in fact, you've got very good self-esteem because you're making the effort, you're doing it, right? So bravo. Right. And I think that could kind of correlate into what we're talking about here with somebody becoming an entrepreneur in a home-based business. Oh, I'm just an employee. I'm just a number on the corporate staff. I am at the effect. I am not cause. Okay. I'm at the effect. Woe is me. I'm not sufficient, right? My boss tells me what I'm worth. And that whole mentality, whether we're using those words or not, there seems to be a subconscious agreement with that sort of thinking. And then to make that shift into, hey, I'm a risk taker. I'm a player, man. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to do it. I'm in control. Right. And I accept that responsibility because I do have a good self-esteem and that's evidenced by these esteemable things that I'm doing. Look, I'm making commitments to my business. I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. But the real work, which you brought up immediately, and I'm so glad you did, the real work is on who we're being. And I mentioned that in, I think it's chapter 4 of my first book. Like you mentioned, integrity is everything, is the whole be, do, and have principle, where so many people are focused, of course, on the have, right? I want to have, or I don't have, or I need to have. Here's my circumstances. Here's money. Here's lack of money. Here's whatever. That's the having or not having. Well, how do we address that? Well, let's do more, and let's, what do we get into? Starting to chase these secrets, right? I heard somebody had the marketing secret. Here's the next quick fix.
Right.
In fact, I just had this conversation with another person I just interviewed here with UprofitPro. They were saying the same thing. It's not all about the what and the how. Okay, it's more about the why. Okay, so now we're getting into the real work, which is who's doing it.
Right.
Okay, who is this Jashin Howell guy? And you made a comment that, you and I have talked about this. 90% of success in home business is this personal growth, this inner work, the inner conversation. And I don't know that people like hearing that. I kind of like hearing that because that means I don't have to develop a whole set of specialized skills. And I've already admitted immediately that I'm not even very good at this network marketing thing. And yet here I am, right? Having made millions and et cetera, et cetera. It's
Well,
really about
and
who it
here's
is.
the thing, John. You know, when you look at it, there's two fundamental needs that we have as an individual, and they're actually two. They're spiritual sided. And what I mean by that is, number one is growth and contribution. Those are the two actual spiritual needs that we have to have. If we're not growing as an individual, we will not have any fulfillment in our life. We will not feel like we're really accomplishing anything. So that whole growth thing, if you're not working on yourself and getting better every single day, then life becomes, it's not even worth living for a lot of times. You go through the same old motions. I think that the greatest part about becoming an entrepreneur, or actually just coming into your own on who you are, even if you're not